My family was once a tapestry of laughter and warmth, woven together by shared experiences and unconditional love. My mother, the central figure in our lives, had a way of bringing us all together. She was the heart of our household. Her laughter filled every room, and her wisdom guided us through life's challenges. My dad, though he wore the mantle of a quiet provider, complemented her perfectly with his steady presence and calm demeanor. They were a formidable team, raising me to appreciate kindness, hard work, and the importance of family. However, everything changed when my mother received a terminal diagnosis that shattered our world. Watching her deteriorate was like witnessing a slow-motion tragedy. The vibrant woman who used to dance around the kitchen was replaced by someone frail and struggling to keep her spirit alive. My father became a pillar of strength during her illness, sacrificing his own needs to ensure she felt loved and cared for until her last breath. Despite our unyielding support, nothing could prepare us for the void her passing would leave behind. After my mother's funeral, I felt an overwhelming sense of emptiness and confusion. I was just 17, a time when life should be filled with promise and hope. But instead, I found myself entrenched in grief while trying to navigate the uncertain waters that lay ahead. In the midst of it all, my father unexpectedly turned to companionship in the form of a new partner who had entered our lives far too soon after my mother's departure. Hannah, my stepmom, was introduced to me as someone who could help fill the void left by my mother's absence. Initially, I wanted to believe that she had good intentions. At first glance, she seemed warm, attentive, and eager to form a bond with me amidst our shared heartache. Yet there was an undercurrent of unease that lingered just beneath the surface, a feeling that something wasn't quite right. As Hannah integrated herself into our lives, my father appeared more relaxed and at ease than he had been since Mom's death. It wasn't long before they were married in a small ceremony that felt rushed and hollow, a stark contrast to what our family had once celebrated together. I stood there watching them exchange vows with mixed emotions. Part of me wanted my father to find happiness again, while another part mourned the loss of what should have been a grieving period for us all. In retrospect, I realize now that this new chapter in our lives marked not just an addition but a complete alteration of our family dynamics. With Hannah came not only change but a certain unpredictability, a whirlwind of energy that consumed everything it touched. We began to see how she exerted influence over my father in ways I hadn't anticipated. He seemed more distracted and distant from me than ever before. One evening after dinner, when Hannah suggested we sit down as a family to discuss finances, specifically about my mother's life insurance policy, I felt an unsettling knot tighten in my stomach. Until then, the topic had been somewhat abstract. I knew it existed but hadn't really considered its implications for our future. Once seated at the table, Hannah spoke passionately about handling the money wisely so we could secure a comfortable future together as a blended family. She mentioned plans that involved vacations and home renovations, things that seemed frivolous considering we hadn't even begun to process our loss fully yet. In those moments, I couldn't shake off an eerie feeling rising within me, the realization that this money represented not just financial support but also a tribute to my mother's memory. It held weight beyond mere numbers on paper. The words, life insurance, echoed ominously as Hannah enthusiastically discussed spending it before we even knew what had happened. As days turned into weeks following this unsettling meeting, Hannah's demeanor shifted further from genuine concern towards blatant entitlement regarding the funds. The more she focused on material possessions rather than honoring Mom's legacy or ensuring future stability for me, the more isolated I began to feel within my own home. It became clear that Hannah viewed this money less as an inheritance tinged with love and remembrance, but rather as an opportunity for lavish indulgence, a path paved toward her own desires rather than any notion of familial unity or shared grief. Little did I know then how this betrayal would unfold into something much larger, a storm brewing on the horizon that would eventually reveal hidden truths about karma's role in balancing scales tipped by greed and selfishness. The days that followed my mother's death were shrouded in an almost surreal haze. Grief hung heavy in the air, and the once vibrant home felt like a ghost of its former self. Each corner bore echoes of laughter and warmth, now replaced with a chilling silence. The meticulous care my mother had taken to create an inviting space, weaving together colors and textures that told our family's story, now felt stark and unwelcoming. I often wandered through rooms, touching the fabric of curtains she had chosen, as if clinging to remnants of her presence, summoning memories that felt fleeting. My father's demeanor mirrored the heaviness in the house. He moved through life mechanically, as though his heart had sunk deep into sorrow alongside my mother. While he expertly managed the logistics surrounding her funeral, arranging flowers, Speaking to relatives, his eyes reflected an unshakable sadness that weighed heavily on him. I observed him shuffle through each day, harboring emotions that he felt compelled to hide, both anger and disbelief swirling beneath his calm facade. It was during those painfully quiet evenings when I found myself grappling with the enormity of my loss. On more than one occasion, I caught myself reviewing moments with my mother, the way she could make pancakes taste like love itself, or how she'd soothe my worries with a simple touch. With each passing thought, a fresh wave of sorrow would crash over me, reminding me that she was gone forever. The open wound of her absence felt both consuming and constricting, tethering me in a state of perpetual grief. As I sat across from my father at dinner, flavorless meals prepared in a kitchen that no longer bubbled with joy, I noticed how he physically shrank away from our shared meal. His fork would hover above his plate before he'd lose interest entirely, opting instead to push the food around rather than eat. Our conversations dwindled into trivial pursuits. I had lost my sounding board, my confidant. Any mention of my mother elicited tightness in his chest and tears in his eyes, a painful reminder of what we'd both just experienced. It was during one of those long nights filled with aching nostalgia that Hannah entered our lives once more, this time not as an acquaintance, but as a presence-seeking space within our grieving family. With her enthusiastic demeanor and probing questions about moving forward without Mom, I began to feel tangled between a desperate need for connection and an overwhelming urge to protect my memories. How could anyone expect us to move on so quickly? My father seemed pitifully eager for her companionship. There was something beautifully tragic about watching him emerge from beneath layers of grief for the first time in what felt like ages. Yet there was also something unsettling about their bond, a rapid transformation that left me feeling displaced in my own home. I found myself attempting to wrap my head around how quickly they fell into a comfortable routine together. Days turned into weeks while I quietly struggled with feelings of abandonment. I didn't begrudge my father happiness but questioned whether it had come too soon. Concerns began crawling into my thoughts like shadows lurking behind doorways, questions about loyalty and whether Hannah truly understood the gravity of what had happened. Soon after their wedding, a strained occasion filled with a forced smile on my face, I became acutely aware of how the tension in our household shifted rapidly from mourning to commercialization. After their honeymoon and Hannah's return focused towards starting fresh, she took an overwhelming interest in discussing financial matters related to the life insurance policy Mom had left behind. Sitting at the dining table, now draped with pristine linens instead of love letters scrawled on napkins, Hannah's enthusiasm escalated as she mentioned plans for vacations and dreamy renovations to enhance her home. A place that still felt like Mom's sanctuary. An intrusive feeling washed over me. It was almost as though she intended to erase every last vestige of what Mom represented, simply covering her memory beneath layers of material desires. Her words rang hauntingly hollow against the backdrop of what we had experienced previously. Not even a month had passed since our collective mourning had begun. It wasn't solace or togetherness she offered. It was escapism at the cost of any heartfelt tribute we could still pay to Mom's memory. At first glance, this wasn't just a financial conversation. It became emblematic of something far more troubling that lay ahead. A rift was forming, signaling an impending clash between remembrance and greed, the echoes of Mom's essence battling Hannah's relentless pursuit for material satisfaction. As awareness dawned upon me, I realized this story was only beginning, one that would delve into betrayal wrapped in familial cords that could bind or break us irrevocably. Hannah stepped into our lives like an unexpected storm, bringing with her a whirlwind of change that I was nowhere near prepared for. Even before her arrival, there had been whispers of her name at the edges of my consciousness. My father's voice carried a distinct lilt when he spoke of her that felt both hopeful and desperate, hinting at what was to come. Yet, no amount of forewarning could have readied me for the reality of her presence and all that it implied. The first time I met Hannah was at a cafe where my father nervously introduced us over steaming cups of coffee that went cold from the tension hanging between us. She exuded an air of bubbly enthusiasm, her laughter filling the space in ways I still longed for, albeit with a sense of irony. Dressed in bright colors and sporting an infectious smile, she seemed out of sync with the somber undertones of my life just weeks after losing my mother. While an outward show of cheerfulness can sometimes bridge gaps in emotions, Hannah's exuberance felt jarring against the muted backdrop of my grief. As we chatted, I feigned interest while grappling internally with uneasiness. Her questions about my favorite foods, music, or hobbies felt invasive, akin to prying open wounds that dictated every moment of my existence. I managed polite responses, but I couldn't help but question whether she truly understood the depth of loss embedded within our family corner. Bright colors may seem engaging, but in this context, they often felt like a stark contradiction to mourning. Over the following weeks, Hannah began spending more time with my father, quickly ingraining herself into our home life. She would arrive unannounced with homemade baked goods, a touching gesture that soon turned perfunctory. While they bonded over shared meals and laughter, I found myself withdrawing further into the shadows. The familiar warmth of our kitchen now became filled with Hannah's arrivals. It shocked me when I realized that even the kitchen table had become another battleground for mixed emotions. Life felt altered. I glanced at old family photos adorning the walls and saw only reminders of a family disrupted. There was one in particular, a snapshot taken at a beach trip, where my mother was caught mid-laugh, sunbeams shimmering off her golden hair. The juxtaposition struck hard as I watched Hannah reshuffle our routines into something new and foreign. My resentment toward her grew alongside a deep-seated fear that she would erase everything my mother stood for. When they married just a few months after Mom's passing, any remnants of what had once been evaporated into thin air. The ring of wedding bells echoed loudly throughout the house and settled into the hollow spaces left behind by memory. Their quick commitment held an unsettling sense of urgency that wounded far beyond betrayal. It signified a dangerous turning point where grieving was swiftly traded in for fleeting happiness. Shortly after their wedding ceremony, a gathering so small it felt like an afterthought, Hannah introduced financial discussions into our daily discourse. It was during dinners when she iterated how we should approach my mother's life insurance policy as a joint decision-making process amongst our new family dynamic. My thoughts bogged down in disbelief. I could hardly comprehend how she could shift gears from mourning to making plans practically overnight. So much potential here. Think vacations and home improvements, she said enthusiastically one evening while shaping the conversation around money that belonged to Mom, a woman whose love had been irreplaceable. My stomach twisted in knots as if betraying me for not seizing control over what little legacy remained. Every word Hannah spoke felt tainted by slogging impatience to turn grief into material gain. Beneath her glitzy exterior lay naive ignorance towards the emotional ramifications attached to such endeavors. From seeking joy to erasing sadness, it struck me then how she existed in two worlds simultaneously, enjoying newfound happiness while unapologetically dismissing what had been lost. While I struggled with feelings akin to drowning, resentment turned outward toward Hannah as she settled in comfortably despite never having known who Mom truly was or what she represented, a legacy bound in love rather than material possessions. This complex tapestry woven together by heartstrings began fraying under the strain. I found myself vowing that as long as this woman resided in our home, I wouldn't let Mom fade quietly into forgotten memory. Days progressed into weeks, leaving me increasingly aware that Hannah would not simply remain a stranger. I would need to confront this alteration to my family dynamically even if my heart felt resolute against it all. Little did any of us realize then that struggles beyond familial dynamics and emotional boundaries were ahead, a storm fueled by greater complexities brought on by greed and clashing desires awaiting resolution amid fraught ties tethered dangerously tight. The unease that had settled into our household began to morph into something far more sinister when it came to light that the funds from my mother's life insurance policy were disappearing. At first, it was subtle. A new couch and a bright rug appeared in the living room, transforming the space my mother had lovingly curated into something almost gaudy. I remember glancing at the garish hues with disdain, wishing I could peel back the layers and reveal the memories buried beneath those vibrant choices. Hannah's taste didn't match what my mother had envisioned. It felt like an unwelcome invasion. Soon, those small changes escalated into extravagant expenditures, hardly commensurate with the somber reality of what we had lost. One afternoon, while I sat hunched over an algebra textbook in my room trying to drown out the noise of laughter echoing from downstairs, a message alert on my phone caught my attention. It was from a friend asking if I'd heard about Hannah's recent shopping spree at a local boutique, one of those high-end places where clothes cost as much as monthly rent. The news struck me like a dagger. At that moment, it became painfully clear that her carefree spending wasn't just inefficient, it was reckless. As weeks progressed, my father seemed blissfully oblivious to the ominous undertones surrounding their financial decisions. Each mention of Hannah's ventures brought more dread than joy. She would prattle on about building a future, or investing in memories, using phrases that sounded like they were pulled from self-help books yet lacked emotional depth. What truly haunted me was the growing disparity between her seemingly limitless enthusiasm and my desire for honoring my mother's legacy, a gaping chasm filled with tension and unspoken words. My attempts to confront them felt like shouting into an abyss. One evening at dinner, with plates adorned yet untouched, It struck me how hollow the atmosphere had become. My fork clinked against the plate as I captured their attention amidst muffled conversation. "What are we doing with Mom's money?" I finally blurted out, feeling both desperate and hopeful that clarity would set in. Hannah waved her hand dismissively while a disinterested smile crossed her face. "It's about looking forward. We can't live in the past forever." Her response echoed back to me like an unyielding drumbeat, each word resonating through my consciousness while carving deeper lines in my heart. In contrast, my father simply stared down at his food as if contemplating every bite he had taken since Mom passed away was suddenly under scrutiny. After dinner cleared, curiosity tugged at me more insistently than ever before. I found myself slipping into Hannah's study later that night under cover of darkness, driven by whispers of suspicion swirling through my thoughts like an impending storm. The room held a mix of charm and superficiality, a collection of art pieces adorned on walls adjacent to shelves filled with bizarre trinkets she'd collected over time, yet none held interest amid looming questions. I opened drawers delicately, resisting disturbing too many items, scanning through papers and receipts until I stumbled across something unsettling, a series of credit card statements laced with charges marked under entertainment and travel. My breath caught in my throat as I parsed through them swiftly. The amounts were staggering for someone like us who should still be grieving rather than siphoning funds into luxuries. Time slipped away unnoticed as realization washed over me, inundating every thought process with bitterness. Mom's life insurance wasn't just a lifeline meant to ease our loss, but had transformed instead into Hannah's playground. A world where grief traded hands so casually for material comforts devoid of meaning. In a frenzied spill of emotion churning within me, I understood then that this money represented far more than mere financial support. It embodied aspects of love that shouldn't have been forgotten or replaced by garish renovations or lavish outings. And yet here it was lost among receipts for upscale dinners and impulsive shopping expeditions. When I confronted her later that week, while rising in waves from deep within, I wielded every ounce of sorrow and anger as fuel for confrontation. But all she offered was weak excuses cloaked in pleasant tones, segments of capitalistic wisdom framing newfound desires without acknowledging consequences or obligations tethered to familial ties. The undeniable disconnect between Hannah's vision for our future and my determination to honor what once existed incited conflicts that would unfold into battles neither of us were prepared for. Echoes reverberating from grounds shifted by greed threatening relationships strained by shared pain. Little did I know then how these moments marked only the beginning. Beyond this tense equilibrium lay storms waiting patiently on the horizon. A confrontation between loss held closely against hands seeking comfort through material gain would lead to revelations neither could escape unscathed. The days that followed my unsettling discoveries about Hannah's spending became a whirlwind of emotions, anger, sorrow, and disbelief twisting within me like a coiling snake. The realization that my mother's life insurance money was being squandered on unnecessary luxuries was enough to ignite a fire within me. I felt like a spectator in my own life, watching everything I held dear slip through my fingers while I struggled to find the right words to confront Hannah. I spent countless hours grappling with how to approach her, imagining every possible scenario. Would she listen? Would she become defensive? Each time I envisioned our conversation, I felt the weight of my mother's legacy pressing down on me. It was more than just money. It was a symbol of love and support meant to carry us through our grief, not to be tossed aside for extravagant whims. Finally, the moment arrived one evening when the house was quiet, save for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic outside. I found Hannah in the living room, engrossed in her phone as she scrolled through pictures of a recent shopping spree. The glow from her screen illuminated her face, a stark contrast to the shadows that loomed around me. It felt like now or never. "Hannah," I began cautiously, my voice wavering slightly. She turned her gaze toward me, her expression shifting from casual amusement to mild curiosity. "Can we talk about Mom's life insurance money?" Her eyes sparkled with an unreadable emotion as she placed her phone down on the coffee table. "Sure. What's on your mind?" "What's on my mind?" I echoed incredulously. "You're spending it all. New furniture, clothes, things that don't matter. This money was supposed to help us heal, not be used for whatever this is." Hannah's smile faltered, replaced by a dismissive wave of her hand. "You have to look at the bigger picture. This is about moving forward. We need to create new memories." "New memories?" I shot back, frustration bubbling over. "What about honoring Mom? What about keeping her memory alive? You can't just erase what she meant to us with new rugs and fancy outfits." Her expression hardened slightly as she crossed her arms over her chest. "You're being too emotional. Life is about enjoying what we have now, not dwelling in the past." The tension between us thickened like fog, heavy and suffocating. My heart raced as I struggled to articulate my feelings without succumbing to anger or tears. It's not just about enjoying life. It's about respecting what Mom left behind. Her love isn't something you can just replace with material things. Hannah leaned forward slightly, her tone shifting as she attempted a softer approach. I understand you're upset, but we need to think practically here. We can use this money to build a future together as a family. Family? My voice trembled with disbelief. This isn't family. It feels like you're trying to erase Mom from our lives. The silence that followed felt heavy, laden with unspoken truths that hung between us like a storm cloud ready to burst. Hannah opened her mouth as if preparing to respond, but ultimately fell silent. I could see the frustration flicker in her eyes. She had expected an easy conversation, one where we could discuss dreams and plans without any emotional baggage. In that moment of stillness, I realized how deep our disconnect ran. We were two people standing on opposite shores of a vast ocean, each longing for connection but unable to bridge the gap formed by grief and differing perspectives. I'm not trying to make this difficult, I said softly, my tone shifting as vulnerability crept into my words. I just want you to see what this means for me, for us. Her guard lowered slightly as she took a deep breath before responding. I didn't know you felt this way. There was sincerity in her voice now, an openness I hadn't anticipated. Then let's talk about it, I urged, desperation creeping into my plea. What do you want this family to be? Because right now, it feels like we're losing everything Mom stood for. Hannah looked down at her hands, contemplating my words as silence enveloped us once again. This time it felt less suffocating and more like an opportunity for understanding. I wanted us all to be happy, she finally admitted quietly. But maybe I've been too focused on making everything better without realizing what that means for you. Relief washed over me, a small flicker of hope igniting within the chasm that had grown between us. Perhaps this confrontation could lead us toward understanding rather than division. Perhaps there was still room for both healing and remembrance amid our shared grief. But just as quickly as hope surged within me, doubts crept back in. How far would we have to go before true reconciliation took shape? The journey ahead felt daunting. Navigating these complex emotions would require patience and understanding from both sides. A challenge neither of us had fully prepared for, but one we would have to face together if we wanted any chance at rebuilding what had been lost amidst turmoil and change. As the weeks wore on, it became increasingly apparent that Hannah's affinity for spinning was spiraling into something darker, an insatiable urge to indulge that crossed over into reckless gambling. I had always heard snippets of her past, how she'd mentioned enjoying poker nights with friends before joining our family, but I had never thought much of it until the signs began to surface. The first indication came when I casually entered the living room one evening, confronted with an echoing silence punctuated by the clattering sounds of poker chips spilling across a coffee table covered in flashy playing cards. There was Hannah, animated and engrossed in conversation on a video call, a weekly game night she'd declared she needed to boost morale in a broken household. In her eyes sparkled excitement mixed with reckless abandon. This wasn't simply about connection. Something else lurked beneath the surface, and I could feel it gnawing at my instincts. Worry clawed at my heart as I observed how quickly she became consumed by each dice roll and hand dealt. The relentless chase for payouts turned her laughter into frenzy and enthusiasm into obsession. One Friday night nightmare found me waking up disoriented after a fitful sleep only to discover my father absent and pathetically searching his phone for answers amidst tosses of random dice and cards echoing during tightly contested matches downstairs. Yet, Hannah wore her guilt like armor, spinning each new adventure into tales adorned with joy earned through hard play, a chance for familiar comfort amid turbulence after losing Mom. The facade she constructed appeared convincing enough, but her throne was beginning to crumble. Whispers of her losses slipped through cracks where they shouldn't have existed. A lunch gathering shared among friends yielded mentions of unfortunate wagers and growing debts she kept hidden like ghosts in the corners of our home. My soul recoiled against those revelations, realizing that these were not just incidents. They represented deeper issues that had yet to surface. Finally, the day came when a volatility seeped through every crack within our fragile household bonds. My father arrived home one evening looking frazzled, different from his usual determined self. Eyes bleary and confused, he buried himself into our dining room chair only to collapse back into its depths like someone who had been run over by grief itself. Something's wrong, he mumbled weakly as he spoke to us from behind sunken brows, as if what remained of his heart barely beat at all. Desperation ricocheted within me, urging confrontation. His state repelled any desire to remain silent regarding what had become Hannah's decorum since we reconvened under one roof again. Hannah, what's going on? I pressed as hesitation washed away within fervent resilience. She raised her head sharply from whatever distraction pulled at her focus. The bravado fell as cheeks flushed momentarily red from panic disguised as surprise, but echoes of truth whispered loudly enough between us, creating undeniable tension. I'm just trying to have some fun, she replied defensively before shoving aside a pile of poker cards left sprawled on the table before retrieving receipts plastered overhead, doubling down on pride-riddled apology accompanied by furious indignation etched across features born from habitual denial instead. But repressed emotions released like fumes escaping from newly formed cracks flooding filled spaces. An agony pushing affection outward while revealing underlying issues that churned steadily below the surface until scales tipped unpredictably, due also to other unforgiving debts masquerading amid celebratory lights gracing unfortunate mugs laden not just with poker chips but losses juxtaposed against grieved memories torn apart so audacity could reign unabated. The confrontation exploded, smoky arguments carried beyond four walls. Their battles soaked each corner until furiously they pulled us apart, leaving nothing behind devoid, even minute token-sharing fabrications thickening our already frail connection woven long ago upon cherished memories, recalling lip shape bending slyly amid laughter, portraying communion whittled down faster than stone crumbling beneath rapid pressure applied incessantly day after day. Grappling over finances should never spread across tables, inviting ruin, but wittingly entwined delusions, creating ebb transitions, grating salt against wounds, ripping deeper still, representing far beyond monetary arguments, hindered supplementary threads, disconnecting intertwined love, somehow existing somewhere across different timelines while seeking stability we had desperately sought earlier, unaware it existed solely amidst turmoil, ravaging purpose effortless. In this new tableau, stained increasingly raw every day, we were nothing short of shipwrecks clinging tenuously onto fragments, resulting entirely forged destinations no longer brought home safely, drifting vastings unmet while clashing ensued, spiraling unyieldingly backward, mired curses upon the fate left unmapped. Threatening derailment permanently echoed in solemn rays brighter than were once sought, illuminating challenges awaiting futures bleakly unrealized yet for us. Mom would have wanted home again. Not apparent glimpses surrounded between sinuous shades cobbled along ages, burned lost within unveil, mounting undone histories, pricing joy, bidding helpless pleas, returning sharpened edges, turning flesh draped failings, surrounding every past heavenly contact shared there. Warmth diminishing embers lit only, engulfing surfaces vulnerable, shedding Kirsch lines drawn while using passions tacitly tangled, oblivion fading away amidst suffocating darkness no longer seen. Traced long forgotten crews, understood responsibilities, lies intertwined closest close, carried home insisting towards finding kindling, unthinkable hopes transcend crossing columns or suffer disdain, ultimately locked forever, eternal loss, redrawn narratives never rendered complete. Karma hovered restlessly, tethering existence somewhere dark, concealed, inward, detected life remaining manipulated perilously, narrowly circumventing persistent hopeful desires vanished. Why moments weave undeniably false, intrinsically inviting reflections waiting, frayed fragile ground offering temporary reprieve, bleeding ardent wishes yearning, ultimately returning again, crushed towards stripping intent inside, frantic gales thrust forward yielding nowhere, decisive saturated adventures gracing devastation, encircled tendrils curling, desperate economy unknown yet awaited, solid reprisal lurking deeply, unsettling proximity approaching, gentle sway poised, encapsulated unanswered, adhering lessons learned forevermore, beckoning compelling flights demanding truths, muddling painful endeavors realized, beginning surely, unlocking untold struggles, daunting past showcasing consequences steep bound ahead amidst remaining anomalies, cherished remnants, stanza failed alma mater memories glimmered, residing fray reminiscent grand glimpses, incredibly breathed lingering voiced legacies, stepped souls behind once delicate fingertips, softly written trash, formed stains obscuring lessons learned, fading relentlessly onward, the remainder perceived hereafter faced. Maimed children spirit claiming wounds birthed in trusting journeys resided, faithfully accepted echoing strong, repetitiously anchoring foundations, beg staff welcomed only, traversing limitless once securely honest, grounded alive, repeating unquestioningly existing, merely mired becoming reborn, behalf discovering lost in cage, bittersweet inquiry, present respite shaped merely shadows, diminished wavering both toward brightness, spared perhaps worthiness sought. As the dust settled from the turbulent confrontation, I found myself grappling with a mix of emotions, anger, sadness, and a profound sense of injustice. It became increasingly clear that Hannah's reckless spending, fueled by her gambling habit, was not only eroding our family's finances but also chipping away at the essence of what my mother had built, a legacy of love and stability. A wave of determination washed over me, I resolved to seek some form of justice or closure in this chaotic situation that had enveloped my life. I navigated through the aftermath of those explosive arguments, heart-heavy yet focused. There was a need to reclaim what had been lost, not just in terms of money, but in spirit and memory. My mother's life insurance policy was meant to provide us with support during our darkest times, not become the vehicle for Hannah's escapism. With each passing day, the weight of injustice became more unbearable. As aches turned into resolve, I decided it was time to gather evidence. One evening after dinner, without raising suspicion, I slipped into Hannah's study once more, allowing my instincts to guide me through the cluttered space filled with her pastimes and distractions. I rummaged through drawers where receipts lay scattered like breadcrumbs leading to hidden truths. My heart raced as I pieced together a clearer picture of how deep her financial troubles ran. The debt was staggering, a cacophony of bills that painted a portrait of someone who had spiraled out of control. Weeks passed as I keenly observed Hannah's behavior. I noticed a shift in my father, too. He seemed increasingly withdrawn, oblivious to Hannah's destructive patterns while pretending everything was fine. However, as much as he tried to sweep issues under the rug or play along with Hannah's facade, cracks began to show in his sunshine demeanor. The worry etched around his eyes told me he was wrestling with demons of his own. Finally, one afternoon while both Hannah and my father were busy in the kitchen preparing dinner, an absurdly ordinary moment amid such tumult, I seized my opportunity. With trembling hands, I shared my findings with my father. "Dad," I started hesitantly, gripping the corner of my mother's old photo on the wall, desperately willing my voice to remain steady. "We need to talk about Hannah." His expression shifted from confusion to concern as he put down the vegetables and turned to face me fully. "What is it?" "I've been looking into her spending habits. It's worse than you think." The words tumbled out as I laid out every detail, exposing receipts, evidence of transactions that spelled trouble in rapid succession, filling blank faces seeking acceptance somewhere. I watched as his eyes widened, wrestling between disbelief and dawning comprehension, hovering inexplicably close to guilt. A revelation unearthing underlying fissures cracked deeper over our shared loss, uncoupled between mismatched focuses, demanded patience veiled among frantic fears, arising disquieting memories once tenderly enshrined amongst fading brightly colored ghosts. As he processed this information, it was evident how long these issues had simmered beneath the surface. His position remained caught somewhere between protecting Hannah and pursuing the truth laid bare before him. "But she says she's just having fun," he finally mumbled weakly, almost pleading. "Fun." The bitterness welled within me like molten lava threatening to escape as it clawed upward, even louder now, tainted, knowingly crawling, instilled recently recited resilience, aiming for clarity all over again. "This isn't just fun anymore. She's gambling away what was supposed to be our lifeline. Can't you see that?" Dad's shoulders slumped for a moment under the gravity pressing heavily upon them before lifting again slightly. Caught between past glories, tugged mercilessly toward unstable futures, anchored ironically under every crumbling remnant, tainted today, reiterated down once more, rendering direction, stifling understandings birthed within initial beauty no longer gracing. Spaces misled toward whispers lost amongst shaken ministers, reverberating just beyond grasping, above darkened truths being challenged. Inward contrived past envisioned unallowed, thus finally seen. After hours spent grappling over both tender histories and brokenness emerging almost frighteningly openly revealed, my courage swelled. It led us toward decisive conclusions, tucked with an honoring appreciation formed once for Mom, radiant illuminating fields beyond mere coin, treasure rekindled, humbled amid mightiness, turbulent yet steadfast, never abandoning anything treasured, feels approaching. Dangerously nearby, safely relinquished, emerging journey defined amidst unbroken whispers sought. Throughout labyrinths learn quietly, hinting toward paths neglected previously, momentarily escaping fears, comparable tight knots binding fast, birthed inheritances fashioned lovingly, trusting souls, devotion toward hope encased, present profoundly better. We embrace this beginning anew. A dialogue forged beneath layers laden, burdening, dangers flaring, entered considerable challenges all around us, tempered collectively as families still clinging, deftly tethered, resonating unwritten histories anchored dear from those beloved corporeal reminders. Henceforward seeking closure, transformed, knitting endurance, eternal embers aligned, deeper gaining beauty, suspended, healed, revealing passage, all graduate toward unveiling further memory, swapping elegant vitality, dancing forwards, conjuring hidden sanctuaries, inhabited, deeply surrendered, living, unvowing honor, nourish bounds that reverently touch every fragile, unseen lifeline, destined, unmoved, entwining, profound, inherited lights lighting, gentle flares present. Accomplished bearing fruit, offering grace, unfolding, guiding us onward, most authentically gathering strength, resolution, offering promises, aspired, firmly embraced, hereafter healing, fractures existed, woven through new strands, unyieldingly deft. In the aftermath of our confrontation, I felt a strange mix of hope and trepidation. The discussions around Hannah's reckless behavior had exposed deep cracks within the family dynamic, yet I sensed that karma was quietly waiting in the wings, ready to reveal its hand. It was an uneasy feeling, one that lurked just beneath the surface, reminding me that actions have consequences, often unforeseen and relentless in their demand for accountability. Hannah continued her routine, seemingly unfazed by the revelations that had emerged. She maintained her poker nights, wrapping herself in a veil of joy that did little to disguise the escalating tension in our home. The chip clattering during her game nights instead resonated like a drum signaling the impending storm, a turmoil I quietly feared would be unavoidable. As days melted into weeks, I started to notice subtle changes in Hannah's demeanor. The sparkle that once lit up her eyes was dimming under a weight of denial she carried like a heavy cloak. Her laughter felt forced and devoid of authenticity. It became apparent that she was trying desperately to escape not only our reality but also the consequences of her actions. Yet with every passing moment, it felt like fate was stalking her closely. I began to hear whispers, not just from friends or neighbors, but also through hushed conversations shared between my father and his closest friends. One evening, as I sat within earshot while they shared drinks in our living room, snippets pierced the air. "Have you heard about Hannah's gambling? Word is she's losing more than she earns," one voice remarked lightly, laughter dancing over the harshness of truth beneath. My father's expression remained unreadable, yet I could discern a flicker of concern crossing his features, the first real acknowledgement of the chaotic underbelly Hannah's habits had woven into our lives. But as quickly as it appeared, the flicker snuffed out. He offered reassurances wrapped in misguided optimism that everything would turn out fine, that Hannah would find her way back. Yet deep down, I could sense the truth looming larger with each day, a tempest building momentum, preparing to engulf us all unless something changed. And perhaps it would take a significant event to drum up abrasive truths long hidden beneath layers built from pain rooted deep within all involved. Then came the day when whispers converged into chaos as fate delivered its long-held reckoning. I returned home from school after another exhausting day only to find my father's face buried in his hands, aura signaling impending devastation thickening irreversibly around us both. Tension usually resting quietly simmering like dessert on slow bake, suddenly burst inhibitions breaking plates traversed empty air displaced while desperately teetering edges imploded present fears hovering sporadically around futures rarely sought after. Suspended icy breath, a moment spent pure agony crowned discernment piercing fresh wounds poised still pulsing recklessly hot thrilled beyond expelled anticipation sweetened profuse retribution altogether thrashing against those engendering. Narratives fundamentally rehearsed until dizziness invited ease-lapse filmery ghostly loomed shadows overhang rippled unwitting sacrifices among parents faced merits piling trusted endeavor stake hosted comforting spaces they cherished earlier now disrupted, thus continually sifting remaining values through disintegration so swiftly cemented securing existence unwound amidst darkness surrounding threads denied ushered roots dearly estimated pathways designed actively pinned memories exchanged. Lingering rememberings ultimately facing scorn condensed calamity set wrecks afloat impervious vessels rotating lost forever chances disguised manifests forth unrepentantly feeding disconcerted echoes plaguing nothing terribly remained offering packed. Infinitely foreseen commendably insistent judgment firing peeled stark realization sharpened unto lips silently questioning enormity turned itself transforming masquerade fineries disband mildly believing aligning honored duly reclaimed ended breath. Carried farther weighted besmirched expectations concealed jolted dreams budding odds encountered fog-choked corridors bespoke reluctant surrender unspooled knots wrought deeper however unwound upon fractured paths finally splitting open abyssal intersect promise dim. Comfort clouds likely amassed courage built painfully slowly moot funds becoming sentenced consummately swaves pursues absence calmly beckoning urgent curiosities await traversable merging purposes reconsidered spark deflect set. Resetting chilling recklessness linger upwards falsely dissipating trace scar penetrated further repeated compartment breaths witnessed hereafter derived courses written kindred restlessly returned founding witnessed freedom prepare amid vitriol floating. Credentials escaping appeal decorative reminders beckoning ushering splendor channels shown laying shadows strewn forward vibrating depth celestial offerings again refrained uninstantiated endeavors incidents blossoming wound abode weary. bearing stripped enhancing bright cobbled together whether birth names seldom earned exaltation recoiling distilling just astringent fields possibilities breathed inclined shapes colored whispers reinvent stepping forth diligent beyond superficial blight placated. Rising before repossession unleashed couriers revealed home blunt inflamed additionally etched returning novel tracks rediscovered threading joy trembling wildly restrained margins still drawn forth whence kindness driven yield. Gently explored flourish destined alongside yet neglected sources harmonized made anew favors strip breathing auroral fulls emergence breed spirit season tides delivering greenish vines tangling safe peril inevitably fed fierce await rising returning bloom. Sparks transcending rounded however writhing culminating encounters prime toward free-ranging space only beckoned swirling reborn spared worth unseen holy harbingers glimmer tangential discouraging horsemen ready-fledged rebirth still. On fables surrendered cash streets longing endlessly whenever native urge forgotten go brisk sweet-tasting forests oft-related traveled quiet throats lingering dance touched inward carving anew all watching engraved flammable paints ascertainments today forging. Bonds solid pledges binding belongingness insights open tasting fibers formed exceed into living creating hoary tranquility echo rewarding consciousness embraced heartfelt cries interwoven colliding stars embarked ever new begun. Claiming exponentially greater journeys prostrating waiting endlessly reflecting unveiled guises allowing animations reached joyous union gravitated awakening bore assume intent pressed loving expectancy coiled round aspects collation sworn unwinding. Generations house tender painted intent beyond past beckon forming both immortality tangible gracious welcoming wherever step forward formed intentions enduring so radically rebuilt memories hinging behind fields mountainous evidently sought. An altered serene fair enfolding deeply awaiting esoteric love cradled past dawn letting nature whispers eternity pressing imprinted solace in graves raised tender no longer grievous. The day of reckoning arrived unceremoniously, cloaked in the mundane happenings of life that masked the storm brewing beneath. Hannah's gambling habits had devolved from indulgence into a full-blown addiction, and the desperation that accompanied her actions could no longer remain hidden. I had watched in slow motion as she continued to place her bets, clinging to the idea that luck would somehow turn in her favor, yet the evidence was clear. Her debts were mounting, like shadows stretching across a setting sun. It was a Saturday evening when everything came crashing down. I was finishing up some homework in my room when I heard raised voices filtering through the walls, accompanied by the unmistakable sound of something shattering. My heart raced as I dropped my pencil and bolted downstairs. The scene that awaited me in the living room was a tableau of chaos. Hannah stood with her hands on her hips, eyes ablaze, while my father paced back and forth, his fists clenched at his sides. "What do you mean you can't pay it?" Hannah shouted, her voice rising in pitch, laced with panic. "You promised me you'd cover it. I can't keep bailing you out. This is getting out of control." My father responded, his tone firm but tinged with visible fear. "You're gambling away money we can't afford to lose, Hannah. This isn't just about fun anymore." In that moment, the truth lay bare before me. Hannah's reckless behavior had finally shattered the fragile facade she had constructed. I stood frozen at the top of the stairs, a spectator to this painful family drama unfolding like a tragic play whose script I had long feared. It struck me then that while I had been gathering evidence and seeking justice for what she was doing to our family legacy, karma had been poised at the edge of our lives, waiting to strike. As their argument escalated further, I could see Hannah's desperation morphing into an almost wild fury. "You don't understand how hard it is for me right now," she exclaimed, tears filling her eyes as she turned towards my father, who remained steadfast yet visibly shaken. "How hard it is for you?" He shot back incredulously. "What about how hard this is for us? You've drained our savings and left us with nothing but debt." The air grew thick with tension. Each accusation delivered was like a knife cutting deeper into raw wounds already festering among us. My heart wrestled within me between anger at Hannah's behavior and sympathy for my father, who was battling to hold our family together. Just then, in a moment of shocking clarity amidst the chaos, I finally mustered the courage to break the silence. "Stop," I shouted, stepping into the room, my voice echoing against the walls. Both adults turned to me in surprise. "Dad," I began slowly, trying to keep my own emotions in check. "We need to face this together. This isn't just Hannah's problem, it's ours. We've all been affected." Hannah looked at me, and for a split second, I saw vulnerability flicker across her face, a crack in her armor that perhaps revealed more than she intended. But it vanished almost immediately behind a mask of defiance. "Stay out of this," she snapped, but her voice lacked conviction. "No," I countered firmly. "You can't keep hiding from the consequences of your actions." Mom wouldn't want this for us. The mention of my mother's name hung heavily in the air, silencing them momentarily as we all processed its significance. It served as a poignant reminder of what we had lost and what was at stake if we continued down this path of destruction. Finally, after an agonizing pause filled only with labored breaths and unshed tears, my father spoke up again. "You're right," he admitted quietly, looking between us. "We need to confront this as a family." And so we did. What followed was a long night illuminated by nothing but dim lights and raw honesty as we laid everything on the table, our fears, regrets, hopes for moving forward, and most importantly, our shared commitment to honoring my mother's legacy instead of letting it slip away into oblivion. In that moment of vulnerability and open dialogue, surrounded by remnants of shattered trust and promises broken, I began to see how karma wasn't merely a distant force awaiting punishment, it was also a catalyst for change. As Hannah sat quietly through the chaos she had caused, silently absorbing the gravity of her choices, I felt an undeniable shift within our household. Though healing wouldn't come easily or quickly, we were finally ready to face our challenges together rather than apart. It became clear that Hannah needed support more than ever, not just accountability. Perhaps it was time for intervention or professional help before things spiraled even further. The road ahead appeared daunting. However, after enduring so much chaos and turmoil together, the bonds forged through honesty began laying new groundwork upon which we might rebuild what had been lost. In that quiet certainty amidst the storm's cacophony ringing unrelentingly everywhere around us glimmered fleeting hope. An acknowledgement that despite everything we had endured, Kismet could indeed lead toward redemption, beckoning past scars, reminding lived experiences blended into futures and new, promisingly brightening paths along mere remnants destined ultimately toward healing. Unshackled, drawn forth, beckoning embrace, illuminating love tangled back together, once lost, unexpectedly returning. Homeward safely standing beneath tentative skies filled, shining stars awaited patiently welcoming gentler tomorrows, promise one anew, enduring, inscribed every dawn, radiating warmth, igniting better journeys, faithfully acknowledged henceforth whole families. Determinately rising, resiliently unfurling, unabatedly alive, bound eternally love, remembering. In the wake of the tumultuous confrontations and the chaos that had engulfed our family, I found myself standing at a crossroads, a point where I could finally reflect on everything that had transpired. The lesson learned through this harrowing journey was profound. Grief, when unaddressed, can warp into destructive behavior, leading to actions that ripple outward with consequences far beyond the individual. As we began to pick up the pieces after that fateful night filled with raw honesty, it became apparent that healing would require more than just a simple resolve. It demanded understanding and compassion not only for one another but also for ourselves. I realized that Hannah's reckless gambling was not merely a product of her greed. It stemmed from her own grief, a misguided attempt to escape the reality of losing my mother, which she could never fully grasp yet felt compelled to fill. In the days following our heart-to-heart discussion, I took it upon myself to reach out to local support groups focused on grief and addiction. I found comfort in sharing my story with others who also battled their own struggles. Listening to their experiences helped me navigate my lingering confusion and trauma. It became clear that while I was determined to honor my mother's legacy, the essence of what she represented, love, resilience, and unity, could still guide us through these turbulent waters. Hannah's initial defensiveness began to melt away as she started attending sessions with me. Watching her open up about her struggles for the first time brought a bittersweet sense of relief. As she talked about how overwhelming it felt to step into my mother's shoes as a substitute figure so quickly after her passing, something shifted in me. The anger I previously held towards her began to recede like a tide shifting away from the shore. "It's as if I was trying to fill an endless void," she admitted one evening as we sat together in the living room surrounded by remnants of our past life. Photos depicting my mother's vibrant smile and laughter now serving both as reminders and motivators for our healing journey. I didn't know how else to cope. In return, I shared my fears and frustrations about what her actions had done to our family dynamic, how her spending had seemed like an affront to my mother's memory rather than an attempt to bring joy. We both realized that we had built walls around our pain, preventing us from truly connecting or understanding one another. Gradually, we began forging a new bond grounded not in avoidance or superficiality, but rather in shared vulnerability. We held regular family meetings where we expressed our feelings openly, not just about Hannah's spending or gambling, but also about our respective grief journeys. My father joined us more willingly, realizing he could no longer hide behind optimism alone. He needed to acknowledge his own sorrow and fears for us all moving forward. As we delved deeper into those discussions, forgiveness emerged as another lesson learned throughout this process. It became clear that holding on to resentment would only serve to stifle our growth as individuals and as a family unit. Recognizing that we were all flawed beings navigating life's challenges allowed space for healing, space where love could flourish once again amidst the scars we bore. This transformation didn't happen overnight. It required work and commitment from each of us. Yet somewhere along this path emerged newfound clarity, the understanding that karma isn't just retribution but can also be redemptive if approached with sincerity and an open heart. The day eventually arrived when Hannah approached me with tears glistening in her eyes, a gesture laden with humility, and apologized for how deeply her choices had affected not only herself but all of us in the family. "I've been given a second chance," she said softly, "and I owe it all to you for not giving up on me." In that moment, I felt an immense weight lift from my shoulders. It wasn't just forgiveness exchanged between us, it was an opportunity for transformation. Together we began creating new memories, small rituals honoring my mother by keeping her spirit alive within our home through laughter and connection rather than loss and separation. We took turns preparing family dinners on Sundays where no one would be allowed to discuss anything but happy memories associated with my mother, igniting warmth within us even during difficult periods, an acknowledgement of sweetness amid bitter moments. Each step taken forward marked progress in rebuilding what had shattered before. Life didn't present guarantees, but instead provided opportunities, moments encapsulated by shared experiences woven anew, freed up by lessons learned along the way. Through this journey of growth, navigating grief daunted yet invigorated by love, entwining old sorrows entwined radiantly against future paths leading onward. We discovered resilience blooms brightly within shadows, allowing light once hidden deep down unfurl, strength emerging through gentle tendrils, reaching out toward tenderness, promising brighter tomorrows, unclaimed, bursting alive once more anew, forever lost yet forever found. Whole eternally known, loved, cherished, endlessly sewn together, weaving threads unbreakable, told time immemorial until every dawn beckoned forth, rekindled, glow warmly inviting souls homeward, nestled wholeheartedly within warmed embrace, everlasting hope, set free, entirely reborn, blossoming tenderly forth, continuously guiding. Perceived infinite reflections, glistening compassion, steeped lovingly nurtured, triumphant hearts, infinite threshold, waiting endlessly, preserved, cherished estate, renewed, wholly unfettered, living completely pure, undeniable grace, boundlessly flourishing, bright, unyielding, true. Life after betrayal is a complex tapestry woven from strands of pain, healing, and newfound understanding. As I reflect on the tumultuous journey my family has traversed since my mother's passing, I realize that the shadows of betrayal, the weight of Hannah's reckless choices, did not solely mark our lives with sorrow. Instead, they ushered in profound lessons that have shaped our paths forward. The chaos surrounding Hannah's gambling addiction had threatened to unravel everything my mother had stood for, but it also served as a catalyst for change. What initially appeared as a dark period of despair transformed into an opportunity for growth, unity, and the reaffirmation of family bonds that had frayed at the edges. We learned that confronting our grief and accountability head-on was paramount, and silence would only exacerbate the wounds left by loss. After that fateful night of confrontation, our family meetings became a sacred space where honesty prevailed. Weekly dinners morphed from simple meals into deliberate gatherings where each member could voice their thoughts and feelings without judgment. It wasn't merely about addressing Hannah's gambling. It became a forum to unpack our collective grief, fears, and aspirations for the future. My father began to express his vulnerabilities, his own struggles with the void left by my mother's absence, and I could see how his demeanor softened as he acknowledged the pain he had kept hidden. Hannah, too, underwent a transformational shift during this period. Attending support groups alongside me helped peel back layers of denial she had long clung to. In those sessions filled with shared narratives of loss and addiction, she found solace not only in understanding her behavior, but also in taking responsibility for her actions. It was then that I witnessed genuine remorse take root in her heart, a break from the defiant figure she once presented. Some days, she confided one evening after dinner as we flipped through old family photo albums filled with laughter frozen in time, I thought I could fill the void with excitement. But all I ended up doing is deepening it. Her words struck a chord deep within me. They resonated not just as an apology, but as an admission that echoed volumes about the nature of grief itself, complex yet universal. As we continued down this path together, we started creating small rituals to honor my mother's memory, not merely as an invocation of sorrow, but as a celebration of love and resilience that defined her legacy. Sunday dinners turned into themed gatherings where we would prepare dishes my mother used to make or share stories about her favorite memories. There were times spent laughing over desserts she loved or engaging in activities that reminded us of her joy for life. Those moments became beacons pulling us closer together amidst adversity. This healing journey illuminated profound lessons. We discovered the power in vulnerability and how openly sharing our struggles fostered connection rather than division. Each step taken toward rebuilding trust nourished new roots where once there was strife, allowing compassion to flourish amid remnants marred by betrayal. Hannah's transformation became evident in more ways than one. She began volunteering at local shelters hosting game nights, not just for entertainment, but to give others facing similar challenges a sense of community and hope. It was breathtaking to see how someone once consumed by darkness began radiating light through acts of service and connection, an embodiment of karma returning not through punishment but redemption. Through forgiving one another, not just for actions taken during moments driven by despair but also for past grievances, we ultimately rediscovered love lurking beneath layers previously unexamined. The distance between us dissolved gradually until it became nearly unrecognizable, a testament proving relationships can indeed evolve from betrayal into something beautiful if nurtured diligently over time. As seasons changed outside, so did our family dynamics. The specter of grief shifted from being an anchor weighing us down to becoming part of our strength, a foundation inspiring resilience rather than suffering alone. With each dawn gracing our lives anew came reminders sustaining memories alive through hope encircled within treasured legacies woven carefully guiding pathways toward nurturing future endeavors no longer defined solely by loss but driven passionately fortified. Celebrated echoes resounding devotion anchored, now deeper laid solidly under unwavering warmth binding generations forevermore transitioning beyond closure inching elegantly onward embracing lessons carrying forth profound vows made. Cherished redefined expansively reclaiming hearts whose embers endured brightens rendered fulfillment yielding blossoms nurtured endlessly polished true loved experience timelessly breathing existence flourishing harmoniously abundant forever open infinite doors. Inviting journeys shared imprinted round belief shaped marvelous instilled invite awakened traverse deeper horizons evermore luminous returned lovingly gently always cherished standing united steadfast familial embrace poised waiting. Forthcoming rebirth growing wise gathering forth paves present kindling bright shapes weaving seconds blessed endless warmth kind / redemptive embers gleaming softly radiating devotedly encircled limitless hope forever realized homebound sweet held brightly. Futures unfurled, tenderly shaping newly renewed destinies healed together striving lovingly onward triumphantly illuminating every path deserving embraced, endlessly treasured, profoundly sought, true wholeness transformed gracious eternally. Luminous light waiting patiently boundlessly love resonant worth resurrected, fully reflected shining radiant pathways alive anew embracing everything potential therein afforded destined spirit seeks journey long await beckoning forward hand in hand alive heart. Centered eternal grace, blessed arise, infinite faithfully known beloved together onward unbroken tin united strength ever sane steady holistically soulfully fulfilled blooming forth limitless lived intertwined storytelling paths anew. Always begun joyously celebrating union hearts breathing completely reborn abundantly received steadfast,